Joe gently here over at SubScribe. If you're an SCW, turn off the video and unsubscribe. Your comments give me AIDS. So this Acolyte is the lowest rated Star Wars yet. They started with, in terms of streaming Disney Plus, with The Mandalorian, which did very well, and then they fired Gina Carano because because of some pronoun thing or something, and it's been down. I mean, they fire people over things that nobody else cares about, but they're bizarro in group of Saul Alinsky aficionados, and it's been downhill for the for Disney Plus Star Wars ever since then. And this show is down to 15%. Where this soy boy idiot, he looks exactly like you'd expect him. He's blaming the audience. The Acolyte's low score is actually your fault. Oh, I would think they would just make a better show that people would enjoy. No, that's off the table. So the globalist media shills are blaming the customers. I think this is owned by Rothschilds, who aren't on board the soy slop propaganda, instead of simply addressing the issues of the bad show. And while it's hard to find the audience retention numbers for Disney Plus, I can promise you they're horrible, because they wouldn't be writing cover articles if the numbers were good. So this article does come close to the issue, and he just seems a little bit scared to say it. And for the left wing, a lot of things are just incomprehensible to the left wing, because they don't sit down and talk to people who are outside their echo chamber. People like me would just be brutally honest with them and tell you what's going on. So he seems scared to say it, but I'll say it, and follow me closely here. Diversity and feminism don't sell to the audience. Is that clear enough? The show has elements and themes that the audience has no interest in. I usually shorthand this by saying it's all just cancer, but maybe that's not clear enough. Disney is including globalist themes of, in their words, diversity, inclusion, equity, all the Larry Fink, Klaus Schwab type of stuff, the one world or new world order type of stuff they were talking about in the 90s. I remember talk radio, and it always sounded so out there. And then 30 years later, I was I guess they were right the whole time. So the audience is not watching the shows that push those elements, because they view it as propaganda that is made by parasites who hate them, because they're also aware of other cultural phenomenons through social media, more importantly, probably alternative social media. So part of this calculus that the left doesn't understand is that the white leftists have out-group preferences. Translation, they're susceptible to media brainwashing. Every other group, including the white right wing, have in-group preferences. So they're the only group. Every tribe prefers to see themselves on screen and not see another tribe, unless they're maybe portrayed as the antagonist, as the out group, and that would sell pretty well, because it's organic. It makes sense to people, because human history. And mixing the cast appeals to nobody. It feels like the globalist propaganda, because it's the opposite of our lived experience, where people prefer to be with their own. So Hollywood presents this inverted world, and what did he say? He said he's not even going to consider some of the options, that it's a bad show or something. It's like, well, then this isn't. I mean, you're not even pretending to write an article. If you say, well, some things are just off the table, we're not going to, we got to have open discourse, but no istophobicism. It's like, oh, pray tell, well, how do you define that? And I'm like, couldn't our side define it as well and say the things you're saying are hate speech? Who's that one of the YouTube reviewers, that blonde chick, is saying, criticism for Star Wars is okay, but a lot of this stuff sounds like hate speech. Again, can you define that? Oh, no, I'm just repeating words I've heard. Yeah, that's the problem, is just people, useful idiots, parody things. And the thing is, when I say idiot, they're not low IQ, but they're people pleasers. We're people on the right, especially people who look like you and I, the blue and green-eyed heroes, have a disagreeability index, where we're more likely to tell you what's what, without that filter of political correctness. We don't have to run it through, well, how will the crowd respond? Because, I mean, if you ask this, you want our opinion. You don't want the crowd consensus. And the left wing does this complicated thing internally, where they have to see how would the crowd respond to it. And they're very scared of that kind of peer pressure. So so Hollywood presents this inverted world that just doesn't grab hold of the audience. The expectation is that these streaming shows will look and feel like the original, and they don't. They look like the political commissars at BlackRock just went through with a diversity checklist. You know, Asian over here, or African over here, or whatever. Their justification is if that they show African, Asian, Euro, Indian, then they'll get that audience that they'll draw from everybody. Except the world doesn't work like that, and the viewing audience definitely doesn't work like that. What happens is the audience just gets shallower over time because nobody can identify with the faux globalist tribal dynamics because it has no basis in reality at all. And the media writes all these... Oh, that chick, what's her name? I don't remember her name. One of you guys will say her name. Writes all these articles calling the fans phobic and the Alinsky manipulative hot words, but then they turn off the comments for, these Forbes articles and IGN and Kotaku and stuff. And then they'll just, if you say something that the Mary Sue disagrees with whatsoever, you'll just get blocked and deleted. Or if you go on Twitter, they'll just block you or turn off comments. And they just refuse to engage. But they can't make people watch a bad show. The star of this show is a bunch of lesbian, pox, walks, whatever women, and one is a man in a dress as part of the lesbian commune, is a BLT guy. Now, what's the fan base among pox women who want to watch a show like this? Out of all the theoretical characters you can use in a cast to tell a story, what combination would have the largest audience capture and what would have the least? And to be blunt, are black women huge Star Wars fans? Are they enough to keep the IP afloat? No, absolutely not. Black men are much more into Star Wars because men in general, but even their numbers aren't huge, and most men of any ethnicity don't usually want to see women in action roles, and women don't either. And I only say this because you have clear evidence of the past few superhero-type movies with chicks in them bombing. Madam Web with that blonde chick and a bunch of sidekicks. And then Brie Larson's movie, The Marvels. And then, the Eternals was led by a female. Ghostbusters, go back to 2016. And then the clip of the last X-Men that nobody saw. That was bizarre. And the clip of Jennifer Lawrence going, she call it the X-Women. Like, dude, people are just, feminism, diversity, cancer. And you have to say it like that. You have to say it as if you're not aware of the social implications of how politically incorrect it is. You just have to say it straight face. If you say a lot of things straight face, it's just amazing what you can get away with because people don't know how to respond to it. It's really so much fun being me. So let's break down the left-wing reasoning in their own words. They talk, that's not gonna sell to people. They talk about empowerment and represent. And here's the thing with the meme about the guy being honest in the boardroom and is on the upper floor and he just gets thrown out the window. You want a room full of echo chambers who are just going to agree with you and lie to you. Well, if you're just in there for a paycheck, that's what I would advise you to do. It's what everyone advises. Like you're just there for the paycheck. You don't give a shit about this. It'll underperform and you'll just move on to something else. That's how all the writers of She-Hulk and all these shows, they just move on to something else because this is what the upper people at Disney want. It doesn't have to sell because that's not the motive. So, but normal people go, we only have a limited budget. If you're in an industry that's not subsidized by billions of old IP money and even BlackRock type of State Street Vanguard type of money, you have to sell. So you want to be surrounded by people who are going to be, brutally honest, but as politely as possible. But, you're not an idiot. Most people would look at this and go, so Star Wars is sci-fi fantasy. The original show is blonde-haired, green-eyed Luke Skywalker, Han, and that chick, Leia, and Obi-Wan. Okay, so this doesn't have the same feeling. And without ad hominem, and without straw man, and without all the Bolshevik hot words of, so what you're saying is, so what you are is, without all that, sell me the show. And you can't, because it's not Star Wars. Star Wars looks a certain way. This is more like Star Trek, and that's a different audience. So let's break down the left-wing reasoning in their own words. They talk about empowerment and represent. And the thing is, when people like me say this stuff, all they want to do, oh, we got to censor this person. We got to get them off. We got to get them off of YouTube. We got to get them off Twitter. We don't want other people listening to what they have to say. But that doesn't sell the show. And then someone will come along and, replace me on one of these platforms. So they talk about empowerment and representation, that they want to see their tribe on screen. So logically, that argument would apply to all tribes, and thus the Euro-Americans also want to see themselves on screen in a positive light, or else they won't watch, which is exactly what is happening now. And all this is not occurring in a vacuum, and let me say this carefully, because of the events of the past 5 to 10 years, people have become very tribal, including the people of the light, your green-eyed gang. There is animosity and discord between tribes, and thus a show's ability to draw a cross-cultural audience is very low, and the numbers back that up. Now, when we say this, these bleeding pussies get offended, but it's not. It's what the left wing in general and the non-Euro Americans, the poxwalks, are saying, that they want to focus on their tribe, and now it's all the LGBT whatever stuff. They want to see that kind of stuff, which is like 1% of the viewing audience, and where those Venn diagrams overlap is a very small number, and you see that. It's like these things are bombing left and right. So they want to focus on their tribe. Well, so do we. Everyone does, except the Euro leftists, who've been brainwashed to have out-group preference and accept that every group has in-group preferences, but then get offended when we also have in-group preferences. It's not logical, but of course that never stopped them before. They don't have a response other than to call you an istophobic Hugo Boss, but they don't call the other groups the same, and oddly enough, they never define the buzzwords they use, leading me to believe that the words themselves aren't real. They're Bolshevik trigger words to manipulate the cattle via social pressure. If you were to engage with these soy writers, you could ask them, can we get a Star Wars that looks like the original? How about we dial down the diversity to 0? They will have an emotional response, but not a logical one, and ask yourself, doesn't it seem odd that there are no movies like the original 77 Star Wars or Lord of the Rings where things look natural and organic? Surely out of all the Hollywood films, there should be a few with just European people telling their stories and not with a black Viking queen, because that's absurd. The reason they don't do this is because those shows would blow everything out of the water with their success, and people would start to realize that something nefarious is going on, because Hollywood, Grace Randolph, I think that's her name, Hollywood isn't chasing money. Otherwise they'd get a bunch of Swedish people who look a whole lot like Grace Randolph to make movies and start making money, but they don't. Everything has forced diversity, and it doesn't sell, and there are no alternatives, and Hollywood doesn't care. Doesn't that seem odd to you? Sort of make you activate the almonds? Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.